Your bedroom is cold for exactly 3 seconds. You pull the blanket tighter, reach into the morning air, and tap the thermostat. Somewhere behind a wall, a furnace wakes with a metallic sigh. Warm air crosses the floor. The smell of coffee drifts in from the kitchen. Your phone tells you the temperature, the wind, and when snow will begin. Outside, winter is an inconvenience. Now remove the insulated walls, the furnace, the grocery store, the weather forecast, and the waterproof boots. Keep only your body, a few tools, the people beside you, and whatever knowledge your group can carry forward. For your ancestors across Ice Age Eurasia, cold was not a bad commute. It was a season-long attempt to kill you. So the question is simple. For tens of thousands of winters with no central heating, supermarkets, or modern clothing, how did human beings survive cold that can punish one small mistake with death? The first answer sounds obvious: fire. But here's what nobody tells you. A fire does not automatically make you safe. Place it badly and smoke fills your lungs. Build it too large and you waste precious fuel. Sit too far away and its heat disappears, while the wind strips warmth from the side of your body facing darkness. Your ancestors needed more than flames. They needed architecture. Sometimes that meant a cave or rock shelter, but caves were fixed in place, sometimes damp, and occasionally occupied by bears, hyenas, or other humans. Your ancestors also built protected worlds from wood, hide, earth, stone, and whatever large bones the landscape offered. At Kostenki 11 on the Russian plain, archaeologists uncovered a huge circular structure made from mammoth bones, dating to roughly 25,000 years ago. The ring contained remains from dozens of mammoths, along with charcoal and burned bone. Researchers still debate whether it was a dwelling, work area, storehouse, or several things at once. But people were clearly rearranging enormous bones to create a human-made space on a cold, wind-scoured plain, and they understood the invisible behavior of heat. At Lazaric Cave in southern France, researchers modeled smoke from ancient hearths and found that people had placed their fire inside an optimal zone only about 5 meters by 5 meters. That position balanced warmth, ventilation, working space, and a smoky area that may have preserved meat. Experiments cited in the study found that open-air warmth dropped sharply after about 3 meters, while a cave could extend useful heat to roughly 6. Think about that for a second. Your ancestors did not simply discover fire and spend the next several 100,000 years sitting beside it. They learned where to place it, how to protect it, and how to shape a camp around moving heat and smoke. They did not make winter disappear. They made tiny places where it could not enter. But a warm camp is useless if you freeze 10 minutes after leaving it. This was the second problem. Your body. Humans had thin skin, exposed limbs, and almost none of the thick fur protecting the animals they hunted. A loose hide helped, but every gap became a doorway for wind. The obvious answer was animal skin. The real answer was tailoring. A fitted garment traps still air close to your body, and still air is insulation. Add layers and tighten openings around your wrists, neck, and ankles, and you are no longer merely covering yourself. You are building a portable shelter. At Canyars in Catalonia, archaeologists identified a bone plate used as a punchboard. About 39,600 years ago, repeated punctures suggest people were perforating hides in a controlled sequence, probably to make fitted leather objects. Bone awls were used by roughly 80,000 years ago, while the earliest known hide needles emerged in Siberia around 40,000 years ago, allowing finer sewing and possibly more complex layered clothing. Thread mattered too. At Aberdour in France, researchers found a tiny 3-ply cord fragment stuck to a Neanderthal stone tool from a layer dated between roughly 41,000 and 52,000 years ago. 3 bundles of inner bark fibers had been twisted together in stages, using the same basic logic, later applied to cord, nets, bags, and sewn equipment. Even their feet were probably covered. Footprints left in Koussak Cave in southwestern France, between 28,000 and 31,000 years ago, matched experimental tracks made with soft footwear, perhaps hide wrapped around the foot and sometimes packed with plant material. Here's the part nobody talks about. A needle looks small in a museum case. In freezing wind, it is life support technology. One careful seam can decide whether snow stays outside your boot, whether a child keeps feeling in their fingers, and whether a hunter returns. Your ancestors did not grow better fur. They invented a climate they could wear. Then came the problem no coat could solve: hunger. Cold attacks from inside too. Your body burns stored energy to keep its core warm, while winter removes many foods that refill it. Plants disappear beneath snow, rivers freeze, and herds move beyond familiar hunting grounds. One failed hunt means fewer meals, when every calorie matters, and meat alone was not always enough. Here is what does not make sense until you think about it. The animals themselves could be leanest during hard seasons. So your ancestors might bring home muscle and still desperately need fat, which packs far more energy into every bite. They treated a carcass like a bank account. At Qusem Cave in Israel, bones dating between about 420,000 and 200,000 years ago show that people stored deer limb bones with skin attached and cracked them later for marrow. Their experiments found that the marrow fat spoiled slowly for as long as 9 weeks under tested conditions. Qusem was not an Arctic winter camp, but it proves that planned food storage had very deep roots. Later groups expanded that logic. Meat could be cut thin, dried, smoked, frozen, or carried in pieces rich in fat and marrow. At Lazaret Cave, archaeologists identified a zone behind the hearth that may have been used for smoking and drying meat, with some hunting and preservation linked to autumn and early winter. A successful hunt was not dinner. It was January, waiting in storage. Even perfect preparation failed when the landscape stopped paying. That is why one of the greatest winter technologies was movement. Your ancestors did not prove toughness by remaining in the coldest place. They shifted camp, followed herds, moved toward wood and water, and sometimes abandoned entire regions before conditions collapsed. The coldest peak of the last ice age, called the last glacial maximum, lasted roughly from 26,600 to 19,000 years ago. Human populations contracted sharply, especially in Central Europe, and many groups moved towards southern refuges. DNA from a person buried about 23,000 years ago at Cueva del Malamuerzo shows that a genetic line survived in Iberia across that brutal peak. In Italy, DNA tells a harsher story. The genetic line present before the cold peak is absent afterward. Here is the unexpected part. Leaving was not surrender. Mobility was a tool, as real as a spear point. A camp could be rebuilt, a herd followed, and a route remembered by one generation could save the next when snow covered every landmark. Sometimes survival meant holding your ground. Sometimes it meant knowing when not to. And none of this worked alone. One person could make a fire, but could not easily hunt, gather fuel, sew clothing, watch children, repair shelter, track weather, and guard against predators at once. Winter punished isolation because every task competed with every other task, and one injury could remove a crucial pair of hands. The warmest thing your ancestors possessed was another human being. Shanidar I, a Neanderthal, who lived tens of thousands of years ago in what is now northern Iraq, survived severe injuries, the loss of much of one arm, and major hearing loss. Researchers debate how dependent he was, but he lived long enough for those conditions to heal and become part of daily life. His survival strongly suggests that his group made room for human limitations. Groups also needed people beyond the camp. At Sungir in Russia, about 34,000 years ago, DNA from richly buried individuals showed they were not close relatives, and their wider population avoided repeated mating between close family members. That suggests small bands stayed connected to wider social networks instead of living as sealed family units. Why does that matter in winter? Another group might know where reindeer crossed the river. They might have dry tinder after your shelter flooded, experience treating an injury, or enough stored food to bridge a shortage. Knowledge moved through people, and people moved through relationships. A lone genius could invent a better needle. Only a community could preserve that idea, teach it to a child, and carry it into the next storm. Winter came at your ancestors with 5 weapons. Wind stole their heat, exposure froze their skin, and hunger emptied their bodies. Distance separated them from food, while isolation turned every accident into catastrophe. They answered each one. Against wind, they built walls, windbreaks, and carefully placed hearths. Against exposure, they scraped hides, twisted cord, punched leather, and sewed fitted layers. Against hunger, they followed animals, prized fat, cracked marrow, and stored food. Against distance, they moved before the landscape failed. Against isolation, they shared labor, memory, risk, and warmth. Here is the larger truth. Your ancestors did not survive because they were stronger than winter. A mammoth was stronger. A wolf had better fur. A bear could sleep through the worst months on stored fat. You survived because your ancestors could turn knowledge into shelter, animal skin into a second body, one lucky hunt into weeks of food, and vulnerable individuals into something far harder to kill. Now return to your morning. The furnace hums behind the wall. Warm air touches your bare feet. Your coffee sends steam into a room sealed against the wind, while a glowing screen tells you when snow will begin. This is the same strategy, expanded across thousands of generations: control the air, store energy, predict danger, and share the work. You are not comfortable because winter became gentle. You are comfortable because your ancestors never faced it alone.